I'm Katie Osuna, and I'm the host of Copper and Heat Radio, a 2-time James Beard Award-winning podcast about the forces that shape our meals. I started this podcast back in 2019 when I was working in Michelin-starred restaurants and noticing all of these social interactions around me. I had a lot of questions about the culture of restaurants and the systems we operated in.
I think the restaurant world's in for a reckoning.
Restaurants are slow to change because everything's made on the smallest margins.
Value is completely arbitrary, right?
What began as a podcast to process my way through working in kitchens as a woman has grown.
If the conversation is a crackdown on the border, then do you want a $30 burger? Because that's one of the consequences of this.
There's just a certain financial reality to making certain businesses exist. And there's a reason that delivery didn't exist in a lot of markets for a lot of years. And it's because it's incredibly low margin.
How a cuisine climbs in prestige and value. This happened to Japanese cuisine. This happened to Italian cuisine right in front of our eyes.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts. And now on Heritage Radio Network.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries, because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni. This is, it's already April 2025, and it's a Wednesday night, April 9th. I'm Jimmy Carboni. It's our 16th year on Beer Sessions Radio. Big shout out to heritageradionetwork.org, and it's our 17th year as a network, and you can support us at heritageradionetwork.org. So we cover all kinds of things, food, drinks, beer especially, and cider. You know, we started out as I'm a pub owner, so more of a pub owner, good beer bar kind of conversation group, and we cover all things food and drink these days. I met Justin, one of our guests, Justin, last year. We were talking with some folks from Canada about cider, and this is going to be a good conversation. We're going to talk about cider, but also what these guys do. So very interesting people in the beverage world. Justin and Todd, why don't you guys each introduce yourselves briefly and say a little bit about Bevfluence?
Yes. Hi, Jimmy. Thanks so much for having us on again. Thrilled to talk to you guys on Beer Sessions Radio. My name is Justin Koury. I'm co-founder, CEO of Bevfluence. We started out as just a group of people wanting to sort of share experiences, create some really cool content. And we've sort of morphed into this company that we do experiences, we do speakeasies, we do campaigns where we work with influencers, media, and bartenders, just to bring everybody together and have a great time creating content and learning and creating some really cool education experiences as well.
Great. And Justin, a little bit about your background for our listeners. You know, they can aspire to be what you are.
Absolutely. I started out wanting to be a chef when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Worked in restaurants all through high school, got into culinary school, and then realized working as a chef was not for me. So I went down a beverage path, sort of a more hospitality focused path. Finished an MBA. We do some consulting. I get to travel, I get to taste, I get to educate, and I get to learn as well, which is really great. So I've been doing this now for 25 years, or probably actually no, wow, more than 25 years. I'll put it to you that way, and so that way no one has to do any math. But love the industry, and it's constantly evolving. I just finished an article today about how things have evolved in distilleries, and it's a really great industry to be in, and I'm thrilled to be able to share it with the partners that I work with.
Great. And Todd, give us a little intro about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. So my name's Todd Godbout. I'm the other co-founder for Bevfluence, and on the other side, I have a site called Wine Compass, which is has more than just wine. It's beer, cider, spirits. But when I started out about 20 years ago, I was started traveling around the Virginia wine industry and started documenting my travels and creating a website of the different wineries. And that was actually before the big craft beer explosion. And so once the craft beer kicked off, I started adding breweries and then distilleries, and now with cider being a new focus in the industry, we've added cider to the website, and the same thing is I've seen sort of just going through the industry, just some areas that are a little empty that brands can do better, can do a better job, and content creators can do a better job with the writings and their podcasts. And that's sort of what we did with Bevfluence, is we're trying to take our experiences and give a better value to the brands and to the content creators.
Oh, great. Well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to start by asking some basic questions that a consumer might ask, or a someone who's doing a staff training and trying to explain some things. It did mention we could talk about cider first. One of my biggest issues, I mean, not as a drinker and lover of cider, but when I try to explain cider to people, are just the styles and dryness levels. How do you guys go about educating or selling, cider to people, training people to sell? I know you've done some things with CiderCon. Let's just talk a little bit about cider and also how you can, get people to know a little more about it.
Yeah, so Justin and I both are certified cider guides now. I think they changed the names for it. So we
Yeah,
basically passed
it's
the
guides. Yeah.
guides, yeah, certification from the American Cider Association. And the one of the main areas I sort of had a similar issue is you start hearing these are sweet, or these are sharp, and like this is a bitter apple, and you don't know what that means. And part of the training that they give you is there's a what they call a Lars guide. I forget actually what it actually stands for, the acronym, but it shows apples come in, they're sweet, they're sharp, bittersweet, or bitter sharp. So you can think of your Golden Delicious as a sweet apple, but then the Granny Smith as a sharp. So it has high acidity, low tannin, whereas your bitter sweets and bitter sharps have more tannin. So that's, I think, a start to it. When you're looking at what apples are, what type of flavor profile you'll start to get with that.
Justin?
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much nailed it. I mean, when we train people about cider, whether they're trying to sell it, whether they're making a cocktail, which is what I have in front of me, we start immediately with the question, what is it you're looking for, or what is it you like? Same thing with wine or anything else. Oh, I really like Josh Cabernet, or I really like, Angry Orchard, cider. Great. That gives us a baseline. Once we have a baseline of understanding what people, what that person either knows or likes, then we can go from there. But ultimately, cider producers are all making really interesting and distinct. We went through a period where we were working on single varietal ciders. We went through 50 of those, just single varietal ciders. And we tasted through some amazing, incredibly dry, really just going through the entire scale of cider from bone dry all the way up to super sweet. And we also discussed things like ageability or what they're going to be used for. Like, hey, is this cider? Most likely the ciders for today, but I've got ciders that I've forgotten about and they've been there 5 years. And it happens. So ultimately it's about sort of meeting people where they are in their education level and then talking about, what it is they want out of that experience, whether they're looking for a cider for a cocktail or they just want something to sip on while they're doing yard work. So
Yeah, no, I like that approach. That makes a lot of sense. What do you like? What do you usually drink? Because you can. I feel like I'm thinking of younger people and people that are just that want to be sophisticated drinkers in all categories. And I feel like we always right away try to go to the expert answer, which is all the different apples that you could have a cider from. And I like your approach, Justin. But if you haven't had a cider, or you're at a you're at a retail shop, you're working at a retail shop, and you can't taste it on the spot. What are other strategies for people to try to sell cider or other products? Besides going too deep into what type of apple it is or too general, like, oh, you like Angry Orchard. Oh,
yeah,
no, I don't like Angry Orchard, so I don't like cider. That's the answer.
yeah, no, I understand. As having spent so long on the retail side, I generally start with a couple of specific general questions at the same time. So they're specific to what they're looking for, but general in that, hey, what's your plan? Oh, I'm having spaghetti tonight. Cool. Let's get you to the Barbaresco section. Oh, I'm having, this, or I'm pairing it with this, or we were told to bring a random bottle to a meetup.
Yeah.
Sweet. It's about talking to people about what they're doing. And sometimes it could be a pairing. It could be with dinner. It could be just, hey, I really want to get into something new. And then you start with, okay, well, what do you like? Okay, you like Angry Orchard, but that you hate Angry Orchard. Whichever is the answer, we can find a cider somewhere in between. Well, what don't you like about Angry Orchard? Oh, it's too sweet. Great. We'll bring you down to the more esoteric dry ciders. We'll look for something that's an heirloom varietal and something that doesn't have, the sweetness that, that you don't like. So really for me, it's always been about asking the probing questions that gets people to their own answer. And then we can find them exactly what they're looking for.
And Todd, anything else?
Yeah, well, what I would throw in is I've seen it just from a lot of my beer friends that, may like, they might be like an IPA or they might like, farmhouse style. And so there are ciders out there. They might be a little bit harder to find, but like we just had a pear cider with dry hopped, and it was fantastic. And so something like that is out there. There are like pet nat or types of sparkling ciders, farmhouse ciders, I guess you can say, that sort of mimic, a farmhouse ale. So if you're into something that's a little more exotic on the beer side, there's probably something corresponding to that on the cider side.
No, that's a good point. So tell me about some of the programs that you guys have that you're doing that relate to cider and other things. I know you did some showcase last year. It was Palm and Berry showcase. Was that yours?
It was, yes.
You want to talk about what the structure was? I guess I don't quite know how you guys interact with people, if you're doing workshops or whatever.
I'll let Todd give you the background on the Palm and Perry showcase, and then I'll sort of let you know about what's going on now, if that works.
Oh, great, man.
Yeah, so we were approached by some organizations to create a campaign, basically like an influencer marketing campaign around cider, and we have a platform that allows brands to register their product, and then allows content creators to register. And then what we do is once we get the ciders registered, we allocate to which content creators receive the product. And so the brands send the products to the influencers. But then what we try to do is guide the conversation. What is the style? What are the different styles of cider? And knowing which content creators received which style of ciders, we were able to help them with their content. And also there's a large geographic differences. Whether you get something from New England, Colorado, the North Carolina, the weather's going to be different. And so give them ideas of what their topics can be. And then once they publish the content, we work with them. We also work with, if they want to have personal time with the brands, we set that up, and we just manage their content creation and make sure the brands see what's being created. And then basically it's a huge conversation where we encourage all the participants to comment on everyone's post. We actually do a different series on the different styles, the different types of apple ciders that are used, that then become a resource for the content creators to use for their posts.
And so Jimmy, what that looks like on our end after all of that fun content creation is over, what we're left with is what the brands really want to understand, which is the metrics and the data. Hey, how well did this go? And so I'm literally doing it this week, working on the last year's Palm and Perry Showcase data, because it takes that long to sort of pull everything together. We have last tasting notes we have to do. I think I've got to open another 40 ciders in order to make sure that they've gotten, they get the respect that they deserve as far as, getting, a review. So that'll all go in our Palm and Perry Showcase report, which will be coming out probably in the next 30 days or so. Right now, it's a behemoth of about 16 pages. It'll probably wind up ballooning to a little over triple that, as far as just listing out all of the ciders, all of the content that was created, and then the metrics and analytics that the brands can look and say, okay, this particular day, X number of posts, here was the brand sentiment for that post. Here was the number of impressions. Here's the ultimate, sort of number. Hey, this is why this was successful. And then turning around and having to explain that to the brands of, hey, this, you may wanted, 3 million impressions per post, but here's what the numbers actually were. And here's why it was successful.
Wow. This is pretty intense, data driven and everything. I would say, can you guys, with that knowledge, can you help a brand do better, but can you also push something that's not good, or do you feel like the point is you're trying to find authentic reviews that will speak towards something that these reviewers like?
The goal is authenticity. We have been approached by brands, and we have been rejected by brands when they ask, hey, what are you going to do with a bad review? And ultimately we tell them nothing. We as much as we sort of moderate what people say, we also don't. We want them to talk about cider in a whatever way they choose, but at the same time, it has to tell a story about what we're doing overall for the Palm and Perry Showcase. Whether it's, hey, these 4 influencers took their cider hiking, or to some outdoor activity. It's the same thing we did with our some previous campaigns, where most of the time, people took, myself included, we took the cans all over the world and took pictures with them outside to show that, hey, these are portable and they're fun. And I took, some RTDs to the Grand Canyon, So it's about telling a story, not necessarily controlling the content. So that's number one. And number two, yes, two things. We can help a brand with this information, but it's only part of it. Social media and, metrics and analytics from that side of the business are only a part of business operations. And so when we do consulting work, when we do work with brands and they say, hey, can you help us? We try and get them to understand that the social media aspect, the campaign aspect, is only one part of how to grow a business. There's many other, avenues to figure out how to, solve other marketing pain points and other, metric driven and data driven, decisions. So we can, but we tend to focus on categories rather than individual brands, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And what are some things that you're learning? I mean, how long have you guys been doing this now?
We met, oddly enough, now that I think about it, about 10 years ago. So we've been doing these types of campaigns for about 6 years. We interlace them with our events. So in Chicago, earlier this year, we got together and we held a speakeasy event in Chicago at a cidery right around CiderCon, around the same time as CiderCon. And so we were able to sort of interlace education, campaigns, and events at the same time. So it's been a fun whirlwind. We've got some other events here planned and campaigns. We're working on one now that's not cider related, but is a little bit. It's our Effervescence Unleashed campaign, and it's open to any sparkling producer of sparkling wine. There aren't very many sparkling spirits, but sparkling spirits, anything with an effervescence to it. So that would include cider and pairings as well.
Does it include hard seltzer?
It would, yes.
Yeah. Wow. And Todd, what have you learned from working with Justin? And you're obviously an expert. You want to share some of the things you've picked up in the last few years?
So actually, just from the two different sides of the equation, one from the content creators, I'd excuse the pun, but I mean, they are thirsty to try new things. I mean, they are always so excited if we say, hey, we have this new product, a new style. They really are ambitious and they want to try new things. And so from the brand side, if you're experimenting, there are people out there that want to try it. But also from the brand side, what we've learned is that they really don't have access to the content creators, to the influencers. They think they do, but there's so many out there, and so many out there that may not give you a very good value. And so I think one thing that we've been able to do is find, just even for us going to conferences, going on different trips, meeting content creators that are pretty prevalent in the amount of times that they post. And so I find it's hard for the brands to actually find those creators that will post a lot about the products where they can get a good value for their money.
Pretty interesting. Let's talk about something specific. 'Cause I know, Justin, you want to talk about cider cocktails. Did you just want to talk about a cider cocktail? Or you want to talk about that as a whole campaign?
I mean, I'm happy just to sort of share what I made, what's in my glass, so to speak. I made a bourbon cider spritz, and I will say cider is such a great option for replacing soda, sparkling wine, tonic, anything with any bubbles. I mean, cider is a great replacement for those things, depending on the flavor profile that you're going for. If it's a gin and tonic, maybe just stick with the tonic. But the way we think about cider should change. I mean, it's a category that's coming back in a very big way from what it used to be. I mean, if you think about even the founding of the United States, cider cocktails were a part of that. The Stone Fence cocktail was part of the Battle of Ticonderoga.
What's the cocktail?
The Stone Fence. It's essentially equal parts cider and whatever spirit you have on hand. So brandy was used at the time, Applejack, whiskey if you have it. Could be vodka or gin, but generally not. Those weren't in common use in early America. But so yeah, I mean, if we're talking about cider cocktails, we're talking about part of our own history here in the States, and talking about having the opportunity to really showcase cider as not just a really fun thing to drink. I mean, it's getting to summertime and people will open ciders, they'll enjoy ciders. And then really it has its heyday in the fall. But ciders can and should be enjoyed, year round. And making cocktails is one way to do that.
So the stone fence, is it 50-50 cider and a spirit, or is it different ratio?
Generally 50-50 cider, cider and spirit. So,
Do you think that cider was considered at that time like a mixer?
not necessarily. Most of the time, cider was in a barrel, and it just happened to be whatever fruit, mostly apples or pears. But you would make a quote cider in early America with whatever you had. You had your farm, you had your quote farm distillery, which is really just a still out in the hills. Um, and you made whatever you could because you had the product had to be used over and over again. You couldn't just, oh, we've got these apples, they can't just go bad, we have to eat. So it's easier to transport a barrel of cider or a barrel of whiskey than it is hundreds of pounds of either apples or grain. So cider was incredibly common in early America.
It's true. So tell me again about the cider cocktail you have, and maybe
So
tell us a recipe.
yeah, sure thing. So I've got 1.5 ounces of Cedar Ridge Quintessential. It is a whiskey out of Iowa. Really nice, really complex. It's a single malt.
I've had it before. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful whiskey. And then half ounce of orange liqueur. You can use triple sec. You can use whatever. I use sort of an imported version of sort of a French triple sec. And then about a half ounce of that. Instead of lemon juice, I just threw a little bit, tiny squeeze of lemon, and then a lemon peel for garnish. You guys can't see it, but and to make it a cider cocktail, instead of just soda water or spritz, you make. I use the Fence Line Thunderbolt cider, farmhouse cider, and it's crisp, it's clean, it's got this really nice sort of earthy quality to it. And then I top that off with a little bit of Fernet, not Fernet Branca, but Baltimore Spirits Company, where we hosted our last Baltimore Speakeasy. We picked up some Amaros from them, and they happened to make an Amaro Fernet, which was brilliant. It's just this great golden color in a highball, and it's a really great, it's a beautiful sunny day here in California. It's a beautiful cocktail. I'm going to go actually do some yard work myself after this, and then that's going to be my refreshing cocktail.
That sounds good. And then and Todd, with you and wine, just talk about how you first started learning about wine and your early days in the industry.
Yeah, so I knew hardly I knew nothing about wine basically. When I started out, I was a beer drinker, and this would have been the early 2000s, and so there's some of this small or we would say older craft distillery or breweries now were coming out in Maryland. You had Heavy Seas, the old Frederick Brewing Company. So I was a craft beer guy, but there's only a couple of them, and there was all these wineries that were springing up, and so I started heading out and learning. It's the same thing. You need to learn about the grape varieties. You need to learn about the different styles, the different processes. Whether it's a red wine, a white wine, a rosé, whether if it's a lightly pressed rosé or a Sangier, which is the bleed. So I just started just going and just talking to the staff, talking to the winemakers, and every time you start learning. And then there's a group that started a wine bloggers conference, and that's actually where Justin and I met. And that's another example where you can actually go to a different region. We were at Lodi, we've been to Finger Lakes, Santa Barbara County, many different places. Actually, they came to Virginia. And really, it's just times where you can sit with the winemakers and just learn. And I've been slowly doing that for the last few years on the cider side, learning more about the apple varieties. And so it's sort of, even though all the different industries within the craft beverage state are different, it's sort of the same. You ferment something, then you age it, or maybe you ferment and distill and then age. So a lot of it is the same. Once you've seen one operation, it's sort of, you don't really need to see that many more. But it's still, though, it's the stories of the whether if it's a long-term family that's been doing it, it's startup from somebody who liked wine or just like in the beer industry, liked the beer and they said, hey, I'm going to do this. So there's always some.
Tell me a story. Tell me one story of someone making wine or something else that you find interesting.
I'll tell you, there's a great one we've been talking about a lot recently. It's Horton Vineyards. Um, it revolves around the Norton grape, which, I mean, we could talk. I did a 45-minute session at our last speakeasy talking about the Norton grape, but basically it was founded into Virginia. It was actually accidentally crafted, not grafted, but just a chance pollination in Virginia. Became very strong in Virginia, moved out to Missouri, and basically after Prohibition died in Virginia and almost died. The great Norton grape almost died in Missouri. A guy named Jim Held from Stonehill Winery found a pre-Civil War vineyard that had Norton vines in it. So he propagated that, brought back Norton in Missouri, and then as a tongue twister, a guy named Dennis Horton, who was from the same town as Stonehill, came to the DC area, became a successful businessman, loved Rhone style wines, planted those near Charlottesville, decided that he wanted to bring Norton back to Virginia, went to Stonehill, got cuttings, and basically resurrected the Norton wine industry in Virginia, where it's going pretty strong now. Like 22 wineries now make a Norton wine. So it's just a fascinating story. And those are the type of things that you just keep going out, hoping to learn more information about it.
Wow, it's funny when you mentioned Norton, and I saw it was on the info on your site. I read that there was an article in the New York Times, and in fact, I'm looking at it now. It was 2003, and there were probably others, but it did talk about, here it goes, Missouri, Stonehill, Norton, and I'm pretty sure I reached out to them and ordered a bottle of it way back then. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and that's it's fascinating that they, and it's sort of I guess it goes across all segments of the industry, but just how collaboration and how wineries will help each other, breweries will help each other in need, and so it's nice to see. He's like, hey, I need some cuttings, and they said sure, and they sent them over.
Let me ask you this about the novelty factor. So, like, even when this article came out, it was 23 years ago, about Norton grape. I mean, you and I know that there's how many grapes in the world? There's easily hundreds, probably more than that. And in places like Italy in particular, they're using hundreds.
I think Portugal has 4,000 indigenous or 400 indigenous.
Yeah. So why is Norton so different? I mean, if there's just so many different, shouldn't we be trying to celebrate the diversity of all the different grapes that are used in wine?
Well, I think it goes two main issues. One, they sort of blend together. So basically Norton it's a lot of people call it America's grape. Its genetics has a little bit of Vitis vinifera, which is your international, your grape species, but it also has Labrusca, which is a Native American, and Estiovalis is what it's officially. So these are native plant species. So they're grown or they're created for this climate. And so they're robust. They're disease resistant. You don't need a lot of pesticides. And so just environmentally, these are great grapes for the mid-Atlantic, for the Midwest. Whereas if you try to plant, Chardonnay or other types of vinifera grapes, European grapes, that you need to, it's more challenging, at least on the East Coast. Now, California is a whole different environment where things are a lot easier there. But from the East Coast, you'll need pesticides, you'll need to worry about mildew, humidity. So just from a sustainability aspect, a lot of these hybrids, or Norton Cynthiana is another one that's a very close relative. No, I wouldn't. I don't know if it's a relative or not. There's different research, but there's definitely been a push to say, what are the American grapes that we can plant that then, like Norton, if you age that 10 years, 15 years, you have a Bordeaux style wine. That's fantastic. And so there's definitely a market for it. And I think just from a growing standpoint, it's very much easier.
So you've got another section on your site about Eastern wineries. So what are you guys doing with the wineries? The same kind of programs? Maybe give me a specific program you've done.
Sure. I mean, the the program we're working on now is our Effervescence Unleashed program, and it is designed for wineries around the world to showcase their sparkling. Often that includes taking sparkling wines and doing weird things with them, like sparkling wine cocktails, like we did in Chicago. We had these great sparkling wines. Breathless Wines in California sent us some stuff. Horton Vineyards in Virginia sent us some of their sparkling wines. There was a sparkling Tanat, which is actually really interesting. And so instead of just, again, taking the pretty picture, doing the review, oh, this is a great sparkling wine, enjoy it on a warm summer's day on the porch, taking the wines, doing the review, but also then using them for other things, sort of breaking the, what is it the tech teams say, think different and break shit. So that's part of what we do with all of our campaigns. And Todd's been doing a great job of doing a sparkling cocktail every month for the length of the campaign. It started in October of 2024, and it's going to go to the end of the year. We're traveling around tasting as many sparkling wines as we can. I'm lucky enough to live in very, very close to Napa and Sonoma, and so I'm every couple of weeks I'm trying to see who will let me come and and taste and talk to them about their sparkling wine production. So again, it's category focused, where we're trying to build up a category, not just a single winery, not just a single brand, but really get in and disrupt that category, so to speak.
And also we want to describe, and we've been writing blog posts about it. There's different production styles of sparkling wine. There's your Method Champenois, which is your champagne. There's Petnat is a different style. Charmet was where you've basically forced the CO2, and so there's different production styles. And we just want to educate not only the content creators, but then also for the consumers to know what they're why does one bottle cost $50 and another one $15? And a lot of it has to do with the production style.
Yeah, no, that's a great overview. Wow. Why don't you guys tell me more things? Because this is, you guys are doing something really interesting, and I just want to keep learning about you guys. How do you guys talk about things? How about that? Like your working relationship, or their tip? Maybe is there a question that you guys have recently asked each other, or one or the other?
I would describe, and I will say, Todd probably has a cider cocktail as well if he wants to share that. But our working relationship, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, it's really me saying, "Hey, let's do this," and Todd coming up with all the mathematical reasons why we can't. And that's totally fine, because he has the analytical brain, the background and development. And so when I say, oh, hey, let's develop this app or this particular software, and he's like, no, that's $3 million in 4 years. And I'm like, oh, I have $9 in my pocket, so let's do this. But no, I would say we meet each other where we are. And I kind of am saying that's sort of my my phrase of the week, I guess, after writing a big hiring and retention article. We work incredibly well together with all of our partners. Anyone who comes into Bevfluence, or anyone who wants to join us for any type of event or just kind of see behind the scenes what we do. We are totally open book when it comes to almost everything. We bring people in. We had strangers practically staying with us in Chicago at the Airbnb, I shouldn't say Airbnb. We didn't actually rent from them, but at the rental house, which we call our content house, just hanging out, coming and joining us for meals, joining us for content creation, and we just let people do what they're going to do, and enjoy sort of the fruits of everyone's labor. We put in the time, we put in the effort with them. And just enjoy each other's company and creating really cool content and tasting a ton, and I do mean a ton, of really great stuff. We had 50 or 60 different spirits at our Chicago event, another probably 20 or 30 ciders on top of that, tons of syrups, bitters. I have 6 bottles of bitters on my desk now, all non-alcoholic from all the bitter. So I mean, just drowning in some cases in product, and it's really fun because we get a chance to really talk about it and create content with it. And so I don't know, Todd, you tell me.
Yeah, and a lot of what we have, there's so much work that needs to be done with just the two of us being the full-time staff, that when people come in and express that they're interested in what we're doing and they want to collaborate, we basically say, what's your idea? Or we either say, what's your idea? Or this is where we need help. And we just say, run with it. This is just go do what you got to do. This is what the end result. And, we try to keep up with, check-ins of how things are going. But usually when somebody comes in, we just want to say, great, take it and run with it. And let us know if you need help, if you need us to reach out, or if you need us to do anything. And we if this is a call, we could always use the help. So anybody wants to collaborate, let us know.
Can you talk about a specific, and it doesn't have to be an influencer, but a type of post or content that seems to be doing really well these days? I mean, it's not just video versus photos, but the style or the sensibility of a post, or they're all so different.
Yes. Social media has changed. And in fact, I was having this discussion with someone earlier today. We were discussing the relationship of sex in the media. And we were talking about how Instagram has changed its algorithms, how Twitter, has changed its, I'm never going to call it X, has sort of changed its, formatting, Facebook as well. And so it's very, very, very geared now towards, once you click on something and you like something, it's all that. And so the types of posts really depend on you individually these days, because the algorithms are set to give you more of what you want. It's no longer, I think, the sort of core democracy principle of social media back in the day was, everybody has an open, equal voice. Now the algorithms are set to give you only the content that you engage with. So the more you engage with something you like, the more that's what you're going to see. What's still popular, honestly, through all of social media and through just general discussion, is just being authentic. I will say 80% of our work doesn't even wind up on social media. We created over 3,000 pieces of content in Chicago alone. Most of that's not going to see the light of day. Some of them are duplicates. Some are just, clips of us setting up. But ultimately, the vast majority of that won't get shown. And that's the same thing with most of the quote unquote influencers out there. It's a ton of back end work, and then you have that one picture of them in the vineyard, or that one picture of them in a barrel house, or that one picture of a great picture of the bottle and it's set. But what you don't realize is that took Jimmy, and I'm sure your audience knows, but others might not realize that it took 3 hours to get that shot. Get it set up. I was just doing some cocktails downstairs. My wife looks at me sometimes like, "Are you serious?" I go, "Take over I'm in the kitchen all the time anyway, but 3 hours or 2 hours to create one shot to make sure that I got all the bottle labels correct, or that there's no glare, or that the counter's not dirty, or whatever." So it's really authentic voices. It's funny because people want video and they want that video content, but the most liked and the most engaged with posts have the most words on Instagram. So if you have a really long post or a decent sized post, those are the ones that actually people engage with, whether it's a video or a picture. So.
Oh, that's good to know. It's almost like a blog, right? Instagram as a blog.
So, sort of a mini blog. Yeah, blogs have, I don't know if they've gone out of style, but they've certainly changed. And so they'll post on their blog, but then they'll put it on their social media, and that drives traffic. Everything in today's world is pretty much to drive traffic to something else, which drives me crazy.
Well, Todd, wine, going from wine to cider. Let's talk about cider a little bit. I mean, the apples are exciting. Sometimes I feel like people talk too much about the apples. Again, I'm going to go back to that. And I still feel like a lot of people don't know what the styles are. And I feel like people know what the brands are, again, whether they like it or not. How do we get more people to be cider knowledgeable and enjoy it? Because I think everyone I turn on to cider loves it. They usually and of course there's a wide range. I run an event called Cider Feast, and we do it in the Northeast. We do it with 4 different towns, and in each one, I think the average person wants to try at least 20 different ciders, and they're at the stage where they really want to try different ones. And if they're more sophisticated, they'll find 1 or 2 producers there that are a little more sophisticated. They still want to try everything and talk to the makers.
Yeah, I think one part, it starts with the brands, where I would like to see the brands. Some of them do it very well. I think Noble Cider might be one that does it well. Is actually on the label, just tell us what the cider apples are that you use, whether if it's just, a single varietal, obviously you'll know, but if it's a blend, just let people know, put it on there. Not necessarily that at the moment it'll make a difference, but over time, people will start recognizing, oh, that's the Newton Pippin. Oh, that's the Newton Pippin. I've had that before. And it sort of just will get ingrained in their brain, knowing what these apple ciders are. And I think just in like muscle memory, they'll start, oh, I know that from somewhere. So I think part of it starts with the brands. I'd like it to see more. But also I think it comes into sort of something like us with the different education that we're hoping to provide both through the consumers and the content creators. I'm going to circle back to something you brought up earlier was, what do the content creators do with a cider or a product they don't like? And it's one thing if it's flawed, then we get the same shipment as well. If we can tell it's flawed, then, we can reach back to the brand and say, there's something not, this wasn't made correctly. But if it's just something that the content creator just personally doesn't like, and, if we want to use the Angry Orchard example, but there's other ways you can use that. And, for example, just in a cocktail. And so instead of just saying, yeah, it's a little bit too sweet, well, then let's figure out how we could use this. And so I actually am using 2 supermarket ciders, and I made 2 cocktails tonight using Bold Rock cider. And Bold Rock is, one of the largest producer in Virginia and probably the largest in the Mid-Atlantic. These are actually, I have 2 of their bottles that are a little drier than their normal expressions, but they work great in cocktails. And so I think that's just something we need to bring out, is that if you find something, buy something in the store and you don't really like the taste, and you're like, I made a mistake. Well, try it in a cocktail. If at the very least, just throw some sort of a Amaro liqueur, whether if it's a vermouth, Amaro itself, a Campari, just throw that in, and I guarantee you have a completely different experience.
So what cocktails are you working on right now?
So I did 2 completely different. One is, I sort of call it a smoked cherry because it uses cherry liqueur and mezcal, and basically fill up a glass halfway with each with some aromatic bitters, and then just top it off with cider. And so you get, the smokiness from the mezcal and a little bit of the the cherries really give it a nice profile. The other one is a historic cocktail that I got from a book about Hemingway, and it's a cocktail that they found in one of his just on one of his notepads, and it's called the Jose Russell, who was that was his ship captain on the boat that he usually went out fishing. And this is just, it's basically rum, lime juice, and cider. Very, very easy, but it's so refreshing. That's the one that I would sit outside after yard work and down one of these pretty easily.
So that was what, like the 1920s or 30s?
Probably 30s.
And so that meant that he had hard cider available.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, whether he got it from somewhere in New England. I guess, cider's made as far south as North Georgia. So but he probably got it from New York. He was in New York. He just wasn't in Florida. So he probably got it from New England or New York.
Well, those stories are great. I love having, history and stories in any presentation like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and any cocktail with cider is just so easy because basically cider is just going to dress it up at the end.
Well, you're making me think. I'm not going to identify them, but there is a really great fruit grower that I know who makes a very quality of cider, except it's sweet. I don't want to call it sweet, but it's fruitier. I guess I would call it sweet cider. It's not sickly sweet, but to me it's sweet. And my first thought was, this is like a festival drink, have it outside on ice. And it reminds me of things like Magners, and some other European ciders. And there's a place for that too, but you're making me think that all that needed was a dash of Amaro or something, or a bitter.
Yeah.
And then I would have a nice summer cooler on ice outside on a really hot day with music or barbecue or something. So, yeah.
Or just throw some dry vermouth in there.
Treat it that way. So tell me, we'll close out soon. What's one thing that I haven't asked you guys, or that I should know from your expertise? I'll give you each one shot, Justin, and then Todd. You can tell me anything because I don't know anything.
Sure. Well, one thing. This is very important. I'm gonna have to ask Todd to go first. I need to think about this for a second.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll do a shout out that
I was passing notes. I know.
Yeah. One thing that'll actually light a fire under me to get it going again, but I actually created a mobile app for that had all the wineries, breweries, distilleries, cideries in North America. And because technology goes so fast, the application no longer works on the modern phones. And so I need to, it's on my list of things to update. But it was just a great resource. I go to go travel and go to a city and say, okay, what's near me? What craft beverage establishments are near me? And it would just pop right up, and it make it so easy to visit different establishments. And that's my goal for 2025 is to get that at least from the Android side, which I know how to develop. And so I'm trying to get that out, and then we'll work on the iPhone after that.
That's good. And Justin, anything to know about?
Yeah, I mean, our next project is a cider cocktail book. In addition to the other whiskey book that I've been writing now for 68 years, collected over 1,000 American whiskeys for it. There are quite a few American whiskeys out there, from single malt to bourbon to rye, and sort of everything else in between. So, yeah, I mean, working with Bevfluence, working with Todd, working with our team and the people that we've had a chance to work with and sort of grow. There is something new every time, and sort of to that same point about how things don't work on modern technology or how things change constantly. One of the panels that I'm teaching later this year at a conference is about the no and low alcohol movement, and what people can actually do with that trend. this discussion has to be had inside the beverage industry, because especially the bev alc industry, because people are afraid. They're struggling with the fact that people are drinking less. They aren't, but they think they are. So the way people have changed their habits, it sends people into a panic. When they see consistency for years and years, they panic when they don't see that anymore. So I'm going to be sitting down and teaching a seminar about no alcohol, low alcohol, and what people can do with that information.
That's great. And just when we first met last year, Justin, we were in a conversation with Ciders of Canada, and that was first time I've talked to, and I got to taste some of the Ontario ciders. So with you, I know you're really interested in spirits, and I know Todd's got a strong wine background. How did you guys start working with things like CiderCon and Ciders of Canada last year?
I had gotten into the cider space some years ago and wound up getting my certified cider professional, which I think is a cider guide now. Speaking of change, and so knew about cider and came across. We were doing these events with spirits and with wine, and doing these sort of collaborations, and we saw that cider was a great and growing category, and so we reached out a few years back and started having discussions with different cider conferences, including Cider Canada Association and a few other associations, and said, hey, let's collaborate. And so last year in Portland, I went up there. Previous year, Todd had gone. And so back and forth for about 4 or 5 years now, we've gone to different cider events and cider conferences. This year, in fact, earlier this year in Chicago, we presented a cider cocktail session at CiderCon. And we also co-hosted at a local brew club in Chicago a Cider Canada event, mostly for Canadians to sort of, hey, who are coming down to Chicago for the event, to come and sort of collaborate and taste. We had, I want to say, 30 or 40 different ciders open. And Barry, who is a brilliant association director over in Canada, we sort of collaborated on getting that event together, and just had a great time hosting, even though it was 10 degrees outside. We had heat and everything, and it worked out really well. We had some local chef who came in and did some pizzas and did some other cool snacks. These types of events, it's really what the industry is about. It's just everyone hanging out, learning from each other, experiencing. You don't always have to have a strict educational protocol. You can just sometimes sit around on a couch and listen to each other talk. And that's how some of the best and most impactful conversations we've had, and I think I can speak for Todd and myself, some of the biggest and most impactful conversations we've had have been with a cocktail or a glass of wine in our hand after the tours and after all of the official stuff is over. It's, okay, well, what do we do now?
Was there a takeaway from that gathering? Because I know that we've talked about imports, and I don't think that was the biggest aspect of it, but it did seem that Barry wanted to have more Canadian entries in the CiderCon and participating in that.
There were several conversations trying to figure out how to get more Canadian cider in the hands of Americans, and vice versa, how to get some more American ciders up into Canada. With the current political climate, I will sort of put it that way, a lot of plans, a lot of activities, a lot of organizational planning has been put on hold, trying to figure out what's next. But we're going to continue with what we're doing, Todd and myself, and all of our partners, trying to figure out where and again, this is where we're meeting people where they are physically and literally. We will probably be going up to Canada, if not this year, then probably next year.
That's great. I'd love to stay in touch about it. I did get a few ciders from Ontario producers that I really like, and back to you, Todd, about the apples, and I know what I like. I'm lucky that I'm in the industry, and I got to try some of the really good dry, heritage apple ciders early on in my career. And so, you ask what do you like? You like Angry Orchard? Well, I'm like, well, I like Farnham Hill, and I'd start with that, or Eve's Cidery in Finger Lakes, and But I think you're right. So what would be a recipe for the industry to grow with the finer ciders? Is it like you said, transparency of label, getting people to know that certain heritage apples give structure and that people like that in their cider? How would you help the cider industry grow with that kind of education?
Yeah, that's that's I guess the $1 million question that they're trying to answer themselves as well within the industry. Um, I think what they just need to realize from because cideries are so different. Some of them, they have their own orchard. They're going to make the cider from the grapes that they grow. So whether they're going to be single varietal, they're going to be blends, or they're going to be more your traditional ancient ciders, I guess, or colonial type of ciders. Then there are other cideries that are just getting the fresh pressed juice. Urban cideries are huge now. There's Lost Boy here in Northern Virginia. Excuse me. So they excuse me. So they get the juice, but then they're making so many flavored ciders. Some that actually taste like a cocktail. And so I think you have to determine what your audience is, or if you're a consumer, if you're an urban market, you're going to want to have almost like you're a cocktail bar in itself, even though you're just pouring the cider. You want to have a lot of different styles in your portfolio. Whereas if you're an orchard cidery, where you're going to want consumers to come out to your establishment, you need to have it as more of a travel destination and give an experience and that's where you could actually educate the consumer about the different apple varieties, the different blends, and why you blended, this bitter apple with this sharp apple, and so forth. So I think a lot of it is it's up to the brands to help educate the consumer, and that I think will translate, at this, you were thinking either at the supermarket where they buy their cider, or, I'm assuming a lot of the cideries are starting, clubs, just like a wine club, where they can start shipping, quarterly or so allotments. I think that's probably a great way to get consumers on a steady basis.
I'll agree with you about clubs. I'm in a natural wine club at a good store near our house, and it's been the best. First of all, I'm not really spending any money because I'm just buying wine. So it's not like I'm paying for a course or anything. And and a year later, I feel like I really got to know this new world of wine, and my wife and I are loving it. Last thing, Justin, collaborations, they're all over your site. Why are collaborations important? Um, Successful example, and then we'll close out.
Absolutely, yeah. Why collaborations are all over our site and why they're important is because no one in this industry exists in a bubble. Even the big brands out there, they started out as small brands, whether they started out with millions or just a husband and wife in a shed. And Todd and I have both tasted some pretty good shed whiskey and wine in our time, but collaborations are what make this industry move forward. And I'm speaking to the hospitality industry as a whole, whether it's collaborations with the media, whether it's collaborations with bartenders, whether it's a bartender and a chef getting together, whether it's a charity and a chef getting together. Those are all successful examples of collaborations, where it takes a village to raise an industry. For us, some of our most successful collaborations have been with the American Cider Association and presenting at their conferences. We had a cocktail booth, a cider cocktail booth, not to keep going back to that, but we actually had a booth at their showroom floor in Chicago, where we had attendees walk up and we forced them to create a cocktail. Here's some cider. We had some great sponsor in Nelson County, Virginia. We had some of their great whiskeys and some of their great ciders from Nelson County on the table, and said, "Here, come create come create a cocktail. We'll teach you the basics if you need to learn them, but there's all these ingredients, there's all these things that you can use. come and have fun. And people from Virginia were walking up and saying, "Hey, I didn't know Bold Rock did this. I didn't know Virginia Distillery had this great, cask finish." And so it was really great to see people in that local market who didn't know that these things existed in their own markets. So it's always fun when we're able to do that and educate people. And we do our education through hands-on. Even if it's a virtual thing, we send out, we work with the brands to get the product in the influencer's hands and in the bartender's hands. And then we'll have a Zoom call. We'll have an event where we're doing things virtually, if not in person, where it's time to be creative and not necessarily forcing, but getting people out of their comfort zone and giving people the chance to be creative. That's what our collaborations are all about.
That's great, man. You guys are really infectious. Took me a while to warm up and be on the same level as you guys, but now I feel like I gotta talk to you guys much more.
100%. And we're welcome to collaborate with you as well. We'd love to work with you on some of what you've got going on. You guys have a great thing with the Heritage Radio Network, and I know you've got your barbecue, your Pozole Fest, and your cider events. So happy to collaborate in whatever you need.
Thanks, man. You guys are definitely always welcome at everything. And I'm going to suggest to George, I love some of the lines you guys said. I'd say it's episode title, Thirsty to Try New Things. That's a great way you described what your content creators wanted, thirsty to try new things. So we'll see. So Todd and Justin, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. The Bevfluence team. I think you guys are going to be doing a lot of great things. I know you already are, but looking forward to it. And a big shout out to George Miata, our engineer. Thanks so much for joining me here. Again, it's our 16th year on Beer Sessions Radio, 17 years of Heritage Radio Network. We'll catch you next time. Thanks so much, guys. Woo! All right.
Thank you. Cheers.